I found a second wedding ring in my wife's drawer. Then my daughter asked, "Why does Mom have two wedding rings?" That's when everything started to unravel. My name is George Collins, and I'm 63 years old. I've lived a life most would envy, raised a family, built a career, and weathered the ups and downs of a long marriage. But when Sarah, my daughter, found that ring, I knew I was no longer living in the world I thought I understood. The days started like any other. The sun had barely risen, and I was already in the kitchen, brewing my first cup of coffee. The aroma filled the air, a small comfort on an otherwise quiet morning. I glanced at the calendar on the wall, another busy week ahead. But I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. I hadn't thought much about it until Sarah came over. We had plans to go over some paperwork for her college, and I had just finished getting the spare room ready for her. But then she asked me the question. Why does Mom have two wedding rings? She was holding a second ring, an unfamiliar one, a simple gold band that didn't look like anything I'd seen before. I felt my heart skip a beat. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. I've been married to Helen for over 30 years. We've been through so much together, raising children, celebrating anniversaries, facing the inevitable challenges that come with time. But a second ring? Something wasn't right. I tried to stay calm, masking the shock. "That's not mine," I said, my voice a little shaky. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I knew they didn't sound convincing. Sarah was silent for a moment, studying the ring in her hand. Her face shifted from confusion to concern. "What do you mean it's not yours? Mom always wears her original ring. Why would there be another one hidden here?" I didn't have an answer for her, and the unease in her eyes only grew. I couldn't tell her what I was feeling, that old familiar mix of doubt and suspicion creeping in. I had always trusted Helen, but now, I wasn't so sure. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in on me. For a second, it felt like time stood still. What had I missed? Why hadn't I seen this before? The ring in Sarah's hand seemed to symbolize everything I didn't want to acknowledge, things I had ignored, things I had swept under the rug for years. That small golden circle represented the growing divide between Helen and me, a divide I had refused to see. I cleared my throat and tried to brush off the moment. "I'll talk to your mom about it," I said, trying to regain control. But in my heart, I knew this wasn't just about a second wedding ring. It was about something much deeper, something I wasn't ready to face yet. That night, I sat in the living room, the silence between Helen and me stretching further than it ever had. I couldn't stop thinking about the ring Sarah had found, about the way Helen had dismissed it so quickly. I could feel the weight of it in the pit of my stomach, the nagging suspicion growing. I told myself that maybe I was overthinking things, but something deep inside me said otherwise. I had been married to Helen for over 30 years, and in all that time, I had never seen her act like this. She had always been open, honest, or at least I thought she was. But now, I couldn't help but wonder if I had missed something all these years. Helen finally came into the room, her footsteps soft against the hardwood floor. She sat beside me, but the space between us felt like an ocean. "George, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern, though I knew it wasn't genuine. I looked at her, her face soft, her eyes filled with what looked like worry, but I could tell she was hiding something. "I need to talk to you about the ring," I said, my voice low. Her face stiffened, just for a moment, but it was enough to make my heart race. "What ring?" she replied, her words too quick, too rehearsed. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "The second wedding ring, the one Sarah found in your drawer." I watched as her expression flickered, just a brief flash of surprise. But then, she recovered, her mask back in place. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's nothing, George. Just a keepsake from years ago." I didn't buy it. There was something in the way she said it, something that felt off. "A keepsake?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Helen, why didn't you ever tell me about it?" She paused, her eyes shifting away from mine for just a second. "I didn't think it mattered," she said quietly, but I could hear the defensiveness in her voice. I felt my anger rising, but I kept it in check. I wasn't going to let her brush this off so easily. It matters to me, I said, my voice stronger now. Why is there a second ring, Helen? What aren't you telling me? The room grew even quieter, the tension palpable. She didn't answer right away, and when she finally spoke, her words came slowly, like she was choosing them carefully. George, please don't make this more than it is. It's really nothing. But I could see it in her eyes. I could see that she was hiding something. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't sure if I could trust her. The next morning, the silence still lingered in the house, thick and suffocating. Helen had left early, probably to avoid another confrontation. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty cup in front of me. I hadn't had a good night's sleep, my mind racing with all the unanswered questions. I tried to push it aside, but it was impossible. The ring. Her behavior. There was something more to this story, and I wasn't going to let it go. Sarah called later that morning. Her voice was tentative, like she wasn't sure if I wanted to talk. Dad, are you okay? She asked. I'm fine, I replied, though I wasn't. Listen, I did some digging, Sarah continued, her tone suddenly serious. I found some old photos of Mom and someone else. They were close, you know? My heart skipped a beat. I knew Sarah had been digging into this, but hearing it from her made everything real. What do you mean by close? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know, but it doesn't look good, Dad. I think there's something she's not telling us. I'll send you the photos. I hung up, my hands shaking. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or more anxious. Either way, I had to face this head on. When the photos arrived, I could barely look at them. There was Helen, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years, her arm around someone else. The man was familiar, but I couldn't place him. The smile on Helen's face was different, too, like the kind of smile she used to give me when we were first married. I stared at the photo for what felt like an eternity. The memories came rushing back, but they didn't bring comfort. They made everything feel distant, like the woman I thought I knew was slipping away from me. I felt betrayed, not by the man in the photo, but by Helen. By the secrets she had kept from me. The person I had spent my life with seemed like a stranger now. I needed answers. I couldn't keep living in the dark, pretending that everything was fine. That afternoon, when Helen returned home, I confronted her again. This time, I was ready. I saw the pictures, Helen, I said, my voice steady but filled with the weight of everything I had been holding in. Who is he? What is going on? She froze, her face paling, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse. But she didn't. She looked at me, her expression hardening, and said, It's not what you think, George. But I had already heard enough. I wasn't going to let her dismiss this again. Helen stood there for a moment, her face unreadable. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she was holding herself, like she was preparing for something. I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. Finally she spoke. I'm not going to lie to you, George. There's more to this than you think. Her words hit me like a cold wave. I had known it was coming, but hearing her admit it out loud made everything feel real. Who is he, Helen? I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. She looked down, not able to meet my eyes. His name is Michael, she said softly. He's someone from my past. Someone I never really let go of. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me. Michael. The name didn't sound familiar at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it clicked. He was the man she had mentioned once, years ago, in passing. She had always downplayed it, told me it was nothing, that he was just an old friend. But now, standing in front of me, I knew that was a lie. You've been seeing him, haven't you? I said, though it felt like I already knew the answer. Helen hesitated, and in that silence, I got my confirmation. Yes, George, I have. It's been happening for a while now. Her voice was barely a whisper. I couldn't believe it. The woman I had spent decades with, the mother of my children, was confessing to having an affair. The betrayal was overwhelming, but I didn't allow myself to break down. I had to stay strong. For myself. For Sarah. How long, Helen? How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice trembling slightly, though I was trying to keep it together. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and finally answered. It started a few years ago. I was unhappy, George. I felt like I was invisible. I was looking for something I didn't know I needed. I wanted to scream. To shout. To tell her everything I had sacrificed for this family, everything I had given up. But instead I just stood there, feeling more distant from her than ever before. So this is how you've been dealing with things? With someone else? I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. Helen nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. I never wanted to hurt you, she said softly. But I've been living a lie, and I couldn't keep it from you any longer. I felt a numbness spread through me. All these years I had trusted her, loved her, and now it felt like everything had been a lie. The house that had once been a home now felt like a prison, and I wasn't sure I even knew who the woman standing before me was anymore. I didn't know what to say after Helen confessed. My mind was spinning, trying to process everything. The woman I had loved for so long, the woman I thought I knew, had betrayed me. I stood there in the living room, feeling as though the walls were closing in around me. I wanted to walk away, to get some air, but I couldn't move. I needed to understand. Why, Helen? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She seemed to hesitate, as if she was searching for the right words. I don't expect you to understand, George, she said softly. I just felt so lost. You were always so focused on work, on everything else. I felt invisible. I needed someone to see me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All these years I had worked so hard to provide for our family, to keep things stable. I thought she knew that. I thought she understood. You think I didn't see you? You think I didn't notice how you were feeling? I said, my voice rising despite myself. Helen flinched at the sound of my anger. I know you tried, but it wasn't enough, she replied quietly. I needed more. And Michael, he was there. He listened. The words cut through me like a knife. I had always been there for Helen. I had worked, I had sacrificed, and now I was hearing that it wasn't enough. That the love and devotion I had given her had been overshadowed by someone else's attention. So, you think this man was the answer? You think he could replace everything I gave you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Helen didn't answer right away. She just looked down at her hands, as though she couldn't bear to meet my gaze. I don't know what to say anymore, George. I wish I could take it all back. Her words sounded hollow to me, like she was just saying what I wanted to hear. I wasn't sure if she was truly sorry or if she was just trying to save herself. The anger I felt was starting to shift into something else, something colder, something more final. I had loved her for so long, but now I wasn't sure who she really was. I wasn't sure if I even knew her anymore. I don't know what to do with this, Helen, I said quietly, my voice low with exhaustion. I don't know how to fix this. The silence between us was unbearable. I didn't know if I wanted to fix it. I didn't know if I could. The damage had been done, and I wasn't sure how much more I could take. I spent the next few days in a haze, the house feeling emptier than ever. Helen and I barely spoke, each of us retreating into our own corners, avoiding the truth that lay between us. I went to work, did the necessary chores around the house, but it was all mechanical. I didn't want to face the reality of what was happening, but it was always there, lurking, just beyond the surface. I found myself wondering how we had ended up here. How did everything fall apart so quickly? I had tried. I had given so much of myself to our family, to Helen, but now it felt like none of it mattered. Every memory, every moment we had shared, seemed tainted by the knowledge of what had happened. I kept going through the motions, day after day, but it felt like I was slowly losing myself. One night, after dinner, I decided to take a walk. I didn't tell Helen. I didn't think she'd care, and honestly, I didn't know if I cared anymore. I just needed to get out. The cool evening air hit me as I stepped outside, and for a moment, I felt like I could breathe again. The quiet of the neighborhood was a strange comfort. I walked aimlessly, not sure where I was going, just trying to clear my head. I thought about Sarah, about how this was affecting her. She had always been close to Helen, but now I wondered if their relationship would ever be the same. I couldn't help but feel guilty, as if I had failed her too. As I walked, I found myself thinking more and more about Michael, the man Helen had been seeing. I didn't know anything about him, except that he had come into our lives like a storm, shaking everything I thought I knew. Was he the reason? Or was Helen simply unhappy, looking for something I couldn't give her? I didn't know the answers, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had been in the dark. I had been too wrapped up in my own world, my own work, to see the cracks forming in the foundation of my marriage. When I finally returned home, the house was silent, just like it had been when I left. I walked into the living room, where Helen was sitting on the couch, staring at the television without really watching it. She didn't look up when I entered, and for a moment, I thought about turning around and leaving again. But I didn't. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting for her to acknowledge me. When she finally did, her eyes were empty, as if she were just going through the motions like I had been. "We need to talk," I said, my voice quiet but firm. She nodded slowly, and I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't ready, but I knew I was. It was time to face whatever was coming next. The tension in the room was unbearable. I stood there, staring at Helen, waiting for her to speak, but the silence between us was deafening. Her eyes were distant, almost as if she were somewhere else, lost in her own thoughts. I had never felt this disconnected from her before, not in all the years we had been together. The person I had built my life with seemed like a stranger, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap that had suddenly opened up between us. "What do you want to say, Helen?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't want to show her how much her betrayal had shaken me, but it was hard not to. She looked at me then, her gaze heavy with the weight of everything she had kept hidden. "I don't know if I can fix this, George," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've made so many mistakes." "We can start by being honest with each other," I replied, my words more a plea than a statement. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Helen closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," she said, almost as if she were trying to convince herself. "I didn't want to hurt you, George. But I felt so alone. So empty." I felt a sting in my chest at her words. How had I not seen this? How had I been so blind to her pain? "You weren't alone," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I was here. I've always been here." Helen shook her head slowly. "I know, but it wasn't enough. I didn't feel like I mattered anymore. Like you didn't see me. It was like I was invisible. I could feel the frustration building inside me. I had worked hard to provide for our family, to make sure we had everything we needed. But now, hearing her words, I realized that none of it had made a difference. "I'm not a mind reader, Helen," I said, my voice growing sharper. "If you were feeling this way, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come to me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked away, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. I could see the guilt written all over her face, but I wasn't sure if it was enough. "I didn't know how," she said finally, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how to tell you, George. I didn't want to destroy everything we had." Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret. I felt a deep ache in my chest. All these years, I thought we were building something together. But now, it felt like we were standing at the edge of a cliff, and I wasn't sure if we could find our way back. "I don't know what to do with this, Helen," I said, my voice quieter now. "I don't know if I can forgive you." She nodded, the tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand," she whispered. "I don't know if I can forgive myself either." The weight of her confession settled around us, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. We were at a crossroads, and the path forward was unclear. But one thing was certain, our lives had changed, and I wasn't sure if we could ever go back to the way things were. The days that followed were filled with nothing but silence. Helen and I spoke when we had to, but it wasn't the same. There was an emptiness between us that neither of us could ignore. I spent most of my time in my office, trying to focus on work, but it was hard to concentrate. All I could think about was what Helen had said, and what it meant for us. I wasn't sure if I could forgive her. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to try. I kept playing the same conversation over and over in my head, wondering where it all went wrong. I thought I was doing everything right. I thought I was providing for our family, supporting Helen, and being the kind of husband I thought she wanted. But none of that seemed to matter. And it wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about everything. The trust, the years we had spent together. All of it felt like it was slipping away. I had always believed that marriage was about being there for each other, no matter what. But now I wondered if I had been wrong all along. Had I missed the signs? Had I been too focused on my work to see how unhappy Helen was? I couldn't stop asking myself these questions, but the answers didn't come easily. I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, stuck in this limbo. I had to either confront the truth and try to rebuild what we had, or I had to walk away. But neither option seemed easy. That afternoon, Sarah called me. I hadn't heard from her in a few days, and I could tell from the tone of her voice that something was wrong. "Dad, can we talk?" she asked. I could hear the concern in her voice. "Of course," I said, trying to sound calm. "What's going on?" She paused before speaking, like she wasn't sure how to say what she needed to. "It's about Mom," she said finally. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I don't know what to do. I know I can't fix this, but I just wanted you to know that I'm here for you." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so caught up in my own pain, I hadn't even considered what this was doing to Sarah. She had been caught in the middle of all of this, and I hadn't been there for her the way I should have. "Thanks, Sarah," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm not sure what to do right now, but I'll figure it out." As I ended the call, I sat there for a while, lost in my thoughts. I realized that, no matter what happened between Helen and me, I couldn't let it ruin my relationship with Sarah. She needed me, and I needed to be there for her. That night, when Helen came home, I knew I had to talk to her again. I had to make a choice, for my own peace of mind, and for Sarah. "We need to figure this out, Helen," I said as she walked into the room. "I don't know what the future holds for us, but I can't keep living like this." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something resembling regret in her face. But it was too late for that. We couldn't go back. We could only move forward, and I wasn't sure where that would lead. The following days felt like a blur. I went through the motions of everyday life, but nothing seemed to feel real anymore. The conversations with Helen were sparse, awkward, filled with more silence than words. It was as though we were both walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing. I spent more time in my office, trying to keep busy, trying to focus on work, but it was impossible. My mind kept drifting back to everything that had happened. I couldn't escape the images of Helen with another man, the way she looked at me when she confessed. I couldn't forget the pain that had settled in my chest, the weight of her betrayal hanging over me like a cloud that wouldn't lift. I knew I had to make a decision, but it wasn't a decision I was ready to make. I couldn't just walk away from our marriage, from everything we had built together, but I also couldn't keep pretending like nothing had happened. The thought of continuing on, living under the same roof with someone who had kept such a huge secret from me, was suffocating. One evening, after another quiet dinner where we barely spoke, I decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my head, to make sense of the confusion in my mind. The cool night air was a welcome change from the stifling atmosphere at home. As I walked, I couldn't help but replay the conversation with Sarah in my head. She had been right to be concerned, to reach out to me. This wasn't just about Helen and me anymore. It was about our family, our future. I had to consider what kind of father I wanted to be, what kind of example I wanted to set for Sarah. Could I let this tear our family apart, or was there a way forward? I didn't know the answer, and that uncertainty weighed heavily on me. I walked for hours, lost in thought, before finally heading back home. When I returned, the house was still silent. Helen was in the living room, sitting alone on the couch. I hesitated before entering, unsure of how to proceed. But I knew we couldn't keep avoiding the conversation. "Helen," I said, my voice firm. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with sadness. "I've been thinking," I continued. "I don't know where we go from here, but I can't keep living in this limbo. We need to decide what happens next." She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at me, as though waiting for me to say more. But I didn't have more to say. I couldn't make any more promises or try to pretend that things were fine. I had to face the truth. "I don't know if we can fix this," I said finally, my voice quieter now. "But I need to know if you want to try." She took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "I don't know either, George. But I want to try. I know I've made a mess of things, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right." Her words felt hollow, like she was saying them because she thought they were what I wanted to hear. But at that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about us anymore. This was about whether we were both willing to fight for what we had left, or if it was too far gone to save. The next few weeks were a blur of half-hearted attempts at normalcy. Helen and I continued to live under the same roof, but there was no real communication between us. We coexisted in a quiet, almost suffocating silence. I went to work, did the chores, and kept my distance. It felt like we were both waiting for something, a sign, an answer, maybe even a miracle. But I knew deep down that nothing would change unless we made a real effort. Helen, for her part, tried in her own way. She apologized when she could, said the right things, but it felt like she was doing it because she thought she had to, not because she fully understood the weight of what had happened. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that we were just going through the motions. I started questioning myself. Was I holding on to something that was already broken? Was I waiting for a change that would never come? One evening, as I sat alone in the kitchen, I found myself staring at a photo of our family on the fridge. It was an old picture, taken before all of this, before everything changed. The photo showed Helen, Sarah, and me at a family barbecue, laughing, carefree, with the sun shining in the background. We looked so happy. So innocent. I wondered if we could ever get back to that place. Could we rebuild what had been torn apart, or was it too late? I didn't know the answer. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay when it wasn't. Helen came into the kitchen while I was lost in thought. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, watching me. I could feel her gaze on me, but I didn't look up. "George," she finally said, her voice hesitant, "I know things have been hard. And I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to try. I want to fix this." Her words hung in the air between us, a fragile attempt at reaching out. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could somehow make things right, but the truth was, I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. Trust wasn't something you could just rebuild overnight. It took time. And patience. And the willingness to work through the pain. "I don't know if we can fix this, Helen," I said, my voice low. "But I'm willing to try. I need to know you are too." She nodded, her eyes filled with emotion. I could see that she wanted to make it right, but the question remained, was it too late for us? Was the damage done beyond repair? As I looked at her, I realized I couldn't answer that question yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep going like this, living in a state of constant uncertainty. I had to make a choice. I had to decide whether I was willing to keep fighting for our marriage, or if it was time to let go. I wasn't ready to make that decision just yet, but I knew that whatever happened next, it would change everything. The weeks that followed were a quiet battle. Helen and I continued to move through the motions of life, but something had irrevocably changed between us. We no longer had the comfort of routine, the ease that once existed between us. I found myself looking at her, trying to read her face, to find a trace of the woman I had once known. But it was like looking at a stranger, and it hurt in a way I hadn't anticipated. I couldn't forget the betrayal. Every conversation, every glance, felt like a reminder that something had been broken, and I wasn't sure if it could be fixed. I spent most of my time thinking about what had gone wrong, about all the years I had spent giving everything I had to this family, to this marriage. And yet, it felt like it wasn't enough. Maybe I had missed the signs, maybe I had been blind to the cracks in our relationship, but I wasn't sure how to move forward. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything. The trust, the shared moments, the promises we made to each other, it all seemed so fragile now. One evening, I was sitting alone in the living room, staring at the empty space around me, when Helen came in. She stood in the doorway for a moment, hesitating, and I knew she was waiting for me to speak. But I didn't know what to say anymore. We had talked so many times, but the words never seemed to be enough. Finally she spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "I know I've hurt you, George. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I need you to know that I want to try. I want to make things right." Her words hung in the air between us, filled with sincerity, but also a desperation I hadn't heard before. I looked at her, trying to see beyond the hurt and the guilt that clouded her expression. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Helen," I said, my voice shaky. "But I want to try too. I want to believe that we can fix this, that we can find a way to move forward." Helen nodded, her eyes filled with tears. She stepped into the room and sat beside me, but the distance between us still felt like a chasm. We sat there in silence, neither of us knowing what to do next. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. It would take time, patience, and a lot of effort. But as I looked at Helen, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we could start over. It wouldn't be easy. It might never be the same. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. I wasn't ready to walk away from everything we had built, even though it felt like it was crumbling around us. I wasn't ready to let go of the hope that maybe we could find our way back to each other. The days following that conversation with Helen were filled with a kind of quiet determination. We didn't speak much, but we both knew the gravity of what had been said. There was no going back now. We had to decide whether we could rebuild, whether the trust we once had was worth fighting for. It was clear that it wouldn't be easy. Every day felt like a step forward and a step back all at once. I found myself questioning everything about our marriage, the choices we had made, the moments we had shared. But despite all the uncertainty, there was something else there too, a flicker of hope. Maybe we could find our way back to the place we once were. It wouldn't happen overnight, but I knew we had to try. One evening, after dinner, I sat with Helen on the porch. The sun was setting, casting a soft, golden light over everything. It felt peaceful, but the silence between us was heavy. I didn't know how to begin, but I knew I had to. "Helen," I said, breaking the quiet. She looked at me, her expression soft, vulnerable. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about trying to fix things," I continued. "And I'm willing to try too. I know it won't be easy, but I don't want to just give up on us." She nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude and I think a little fear. "I don't want to give up either, George. I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry for that. I want to make things right, but I know it's going to take time." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "It's going to take more than time," I said, my voice steady. "It's going to take work. From both of us." We sat there for a while, just watching the sky change colors. The moment felt significant, like a new chapter was beginning. But it was clear that it wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but I knew we had a choice. We could either fight for what we had or let it slip away. As the evening wore on, I realized that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would require patience, understanding, and most of all, trust. Could we rebuild that trust? I didn't know. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could try.